Welcome back to Knit Together with Kim and Jonna. I'm Kim.
And I'm Jonna.
And we are here to talk about
Colorwork.
Stranded colorwork, to be specific.
Yeah, not mosaic knitting, not
stripes.
tarja, not stripes. Stranded colorwork, because we both happen to be working on stranded colorwork projects. And mine is a Fair Isle vest. So my Fair Isle follows certain rules. That your sweater is colorwork, stranded colorwork, but it is not Fair Isle.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't follow those general traditional guidelines.
Now this sweater is Fair Isle for the most part. Weren't there some 3-color rows?
There were. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There was one section in the body and one section on the sleeves.
So technically,
this one, I think.
Fair Isle, you're typically only using 2 colors at a time.
Right. Per row. Mm-hmm. Even though it looks like much more complicated than that. It's not. Yeah, so I just started my Here Comes the Sun sweater, finally. And Jonna had just started, which she revealed in episode 16.
Yeah. This is the Academic by Skein Ellie of Skein. And the reason I'm not knitting on this is because I'm right at the armhole steeks where I need to create the steeks, and I cannot do that and talk coherently at the same time, so...
I just have to comment on this right now. The way, you're right, and I can see it better in this light than when we filmed episode 16. The way this minty green just pops is divine. And
I didn't plan it. I cast this on. I can't even tell you how many times I ripped back. I'd start with, the first contrast color. I was like, oh, that's not quite right. Or I liked it, and then I get to the next one. I was like, oh, that's not quite right. And so I'd rip back, and then I'd try other colors. So this was a long process of choosing the right colors.
But it's amazing. In episode 16, actually, I inserted 2 of the iterations. You did take pictures, and I contacted her when I was editing and said, do you have any of those pictures? Because you talk about it, and it's amazing how different it looks in the different iterations.
So different. Well, I was kind of hung up on that minty green color because of Jackie from Caddy Jack's Knits podcast. But then I kind of got over that, and I went with my dark, moody blue-black. And I was worried about just blues. I was worried about blues and greens together. And then I pulled out this brown Rama that I had. And I think that's really the pop color. And I really wanted to use the minty green too. So I'm really happy with the way it's turned out. That said, this podcast is not going to be about how to choose colors for Fair Isle. It's not exactly, it's not a tutorial. And I just want to preface this by kind of like, this is what I've learned about color work and what works for me. And this is what you've learned about color work and what works for you.
Yeah, and when Jonna sent me her notes today, she does things completely differently than I do.
Really?
And yeah, I mean, a lot of the things, that's why in the notes, if I agreed or I did them the same way, I didn't put my name, but if there's something that maybe I do a little differently, and honestly, I may eventually change to the way Jonna does it, because I don't know that I completely love. I haven't done a lot of stranded color work. I'm still kind of figuring it out. For now, what I'm doing works for me, but I may change it someday. Basically, there is no right or wrong as long as...
Right. And that's what I really want to, express is that this is what works for me.
Yeah,
tension-wise, you're a tight knitter, I'm a loose, or kind of even knitter. And then it all depends on your yarn. I'm using super, super sticky wool that is sticking to it itself, and you're using slippery wool.
Right, non-traditional.
Yeah, and you may tension your yarn differently if you were using different yarn. So this is kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mentioned in another video that I had this love-hate relationship with color work because I felt like I just couldn't do it right, I tried 2-handed, 1-handed, like you do, holding both colors in one hand. And I have come to, right now, I am completely dropping the color that I'm not using. So I'm a continental knitter. I knit with my left hand. I tension my yarn in my left hand. And so I completely drop the other color. That said, I manage my colors the same way all the time. So the color that is a contrast color, the color I'm not using as much, I keep to my left, to the left of my body. And so that yarn is actually stranded underneath my main color, which I always keep to the right of my body. And so I'm always reaching for my contrast color underneath my main color. So I always maintain the floats.
Mm-hmm.
So that the main color is always sitting on top of the contrast color.
Right, and that really gets into one of our first little points is, again, we're not experts, but we're just sharing what works for us, and that it's often different. So right now we're talking about, kind of like dominance in a way, the color dominance, and managing the two different strands. So when you're saying that you have your contrast color on the left side of your body, and your main color on the right side. So if I tension it, I'm going to hold it this way to the camera so you can see. So I tension it with my main color on but that's the same thing. So that's kind of on the right, and this is on the left. My contrast is on the left. That's exactly what you're saying.
And you maintain that.
I do, but that was another question on one of these points. So we're kind of talking to each other. Sorry about that. Just pretend like you're right here with us in the room.
Right.
And pipe in if you want to say something.
And I mean, this is actually why I wanted to start the podcast, is because I love to talk about knitting. So.
Yeah. So this is my question, though. So, for instance, in this motif that I'm doing right now, the background color really is this kind of, light bluish, the light color, is the background color.
The contrast color, because you're doing more pink.
But that changes per row. So that's what I'm asking is, it isn't per motif that I orient the yarns not per motif, which is the contrast and which is the main. I orient my tensioning yarns per row. I look at that row and I say, oh, there's more pink in this row. So pink is going to be on the end of my finger, and the white is going to be more to the, what you said, the left.
Okay.
So is that what you do?
Same, yeah. So whatever color is the contrast color, I hold to the left.
Yeah. So as far as yarn color dominance, some people say that you should always hold one color on one side and one on the other, so it stays the same the whole time. But I think I heard it from Arne and Carlos that even if there is a slight... At first, they didn't really think
that there was color dominance.
Right. But then I think they kind of thought about it some more or tried it out. And I think they haven't had an issue with it because you're changing it per row, then it isn't like one whole line of stitches is dominant. So it kind of
evens out.
Yes.
Yes. And I think you're right. I think I remember that episode.
Right? I remember that.
Right.
So it isn't like one motif is going to stand out more because each row I'm changing the dominant color depending on which yarn I'm using the most in that row. So it kind of all evens out. Do you agree?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. We do that the same.
But I was looking at Jonna's notes. She sent me her notes and she said, these are just my notes. I hope they make sense to you. I mean, first of all, they totally made sense.
That's good, because I was typing that off some scribbled notepad, yellow notepad that I keep on my bed, so that I have these ideas while I'm knitting. I can write it down. So,
and so of course I understood everything. And when I was looking at it, I kept thinking, is that the way I do it? Is that? So I didn't know if that was similar or different. So I didn't know if you changed your dominant color or your main color or your contrast color per row.
Right. And so when I say contrast color or dominant color, I don't mean what the pattern is telling you is your dominant color or your contrast color. I'm just saying for that row, to me, the contrast color is the one that you are using the least of. So your dominant color would be, your main color would be the one that you're using the most.
And you know why the way I tension, the reason that I make the outside color my main or dominant color for that row is pure efficiency. Because when I'm catching floats, if I'm catching a float of the light color while using this, the catching floats with Continental, you just go under and grab and then you go over. But and sometimes I do have to catch floats the other way. To catch a float for this color, it's a lot more complicated.
Yes.
So whichever color I'm going to be catching the most floats on, I put it on the bottom. Because it's easier.
Definitely.
Complete efficiency.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one of the reasons for that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
following this because we're just really like.
I know. And I took a dusty table out of the garage, so we're both kind of choking on dust. And so, sorry.
Right before this, we're finishing setting up, and Jonna is, her dad comes in with nuts or bolts.
Nuts. I was like, Dad, I need some bolts. And he's like, no, you need nuts. I was like, oh yeah, I need nuts.
Whatever.
Nuts and washers. And before this, I was like ready to film, and I was crawling around our laundry room floor because I'm washing some knits and the water wasn't draining. And so I had to get down on my hands and knees and drain the water manually.
Oh gosh.
So I was doing that, and then I did this. And
She's
then
assembling the legs on this antique table.
Yeah. So anyway, I think I'm choking on dust, so I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
But, okay, I guess let's start at the top.
Okay.
We kind of just jumped into the middle.
Now that we just rambled for how many
Yeah.
minutes? Let's see. Almost 19 minutes. So, yeah.
We're going to have to flip the timer here in a sec.
Yeah.
But I think we can get through this first point, which is, and I had to learn this the hard way, stagger where you catch your floats. And so it's really important when you're looking at a chart, then you know that you're going to have a section of 6 stitches. And, you know, where you catch floats or if you catch floats, I mean, that's kind of personal preference. Some people don't catch them. Some people catch them every other. Some people catch them, you know, they have a rule every 4 or every 5 or whatever. Doesn't matter what you do.
I prefer, if there's 9 stitches, like everything in me wants to catch the float on the center stitch. I mean, everything in me. If it's even stitches, it drives me nutso.
Right.
So, but the thing is, and this is what you're going to say, if I do satisfy my symmetrical needs and catch it on that middle stitch
So
one way around,
stitch on the 9.
the next time around, if I'm repeating the same motif or it's the same 9 stitches, I can't catch it there, and it drives me crazy. So why can't you catch it there? Why shouldn't you?
Because it'll end up looking like you have a twisted stitch. That's, to me, that's what it looks like. It just it opens up that stitch a little bit, and so then if you catch one in the same place right above it, it just looks...
It pulls on the stitch in a strange way.
Yeah, it does.
And so if you keep doing that row after row after row, or even just twice...
It just looks like a twisted stitch to
it
me,
doesn't,
even though it isn't.
Yeah, it just doesn't lay nice and even and flat.
So it's a really good idea on your charts to mark where you are catching floats, because... And then don't change it, because I'm famous for this. It's like, oh, I'll catch it on 3, I'll catch it on 4, I'll catch it on 5. Don't do that.
Within a row.
Yeah, within one row. Don't do that.
Do it the same way on every pattern. Motif repeat.
Yes, on the 4th stitch in that section, or the 5th stitch, or whatever it is you choose. Just stick to it. And then in the following row, if you need to catch floats again, at least you know where not to catch them.
Sorry. No, see? It's probably
More
the dust.
I know, I'm sorry.
How often do you catch a float? How many stitches? What were we talking about before the camera so rudely cut us off?
I know, it was important too. The floats, not catching them on the same stitch.
Oh, I know what I wanted to ask. So, how often do you catch floats? How many stitches will you go without catching a float?
So, it's tough, because if I have 5 stitches of the same color, I'm like, oh, do I catch it on the 3rd stitch? Sometimes I let my floats go 5.
I'm not catching. I'm only catching over 5 on this.
Yeah.
On this.
I think 6, anything 6 and
that's what I'm doing.
I would catch a float. Yeah, I think 5 stitch floats are fine.
Yeah. And of course, depending on the weight of the yarn, that makes a big difference as well, I think.
Sure.
Because,
if you're using alpaca, something really super drapey, and you're a loose knitter, and there's lots of things to take into account.
Yeah.
So stagger your float catches. Number 1. Number 2, and this is from me. So I am, like I said, pretty even tension, and you're a tight knitter, so I'm surprised. Do you agree with this one, or?
Yes, and actually I was doing it as I was reading your notes. I'm
really?
pulling extra slack out of my yarn cake.
Don't be knitting off of your yarn cake. Pull a bunch of slack out. I mean, don't tangle up your yarn, but pull a bunch of slack, and do not let your yarn just be tensioned right off the ball, because it's just going to lead to tight floats and puckery color work. So that has really helped me a bunch. So I just pull off a bunch of slack, both my colors, and knit away.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we agree on that one.
Yes, it's funny if I have like a little bit of a focused face every few stitches. Today, I was actually much further on this yoke, the yoke of my Here Comes the Sun sweater. And a few rows back, I had looked at it and realized that I had never done color work with increases, because this didn't have, only had decreases, because I knit from the bottom up. And so for arm, actually I think it was straight, so there weren't even any, or maybe in the neckline, so it was all decreases, which are easier. And so this is really the first time I had done like make ones while doing color work. And I had to do make ones, and I reached down and grabbed the quickest float, because we know I'm a lazy knitter.
Or the closest float.
The closest or bar or whatever. And I got a few rows beyond, and I looked at my little pink petals, and the top rounded edge had little wings, because I was knitting...
Almost like these.
Yes. I was knitting white stitches and picked up a pink bar. Because there is a white bar down there, but it's like buried. And so like, see, I'm at it right now. You see how you can't even see it if I first look at it? I did make a video of me unraveling, because what I decided, I had gone pretty far beyond it. And it was driving me nuts. And
Did you pull it out while we were talking on the phone?
No. But this is the thing. I knit by intuition, because I've been knitting for so long, and I tend to not look things up first. But Jonna, because you're a relatively new knitter, you tend to research...
I'm convinced I'm doing it wrong, so
Jonna tends to research things first and figure out all the different ways and choose, and I don't do that. I just dive in with reckless abandon, and a lot of times I regret it later. So I assumed it was fine, no big deal. I'm grabbing a pink bar to make a white stitch. But then these little wings were on the petal. It looked horrible. And I thought, I can live with it. It's a design choice. But I would not have been happy. So I decided, I looked at a video on how to make one increases and knitting in the round and a color work, whatever. And sure enough, it shows that to find the correct bar, I mean, see, I really have to fish. Normally I can just take my left needle and go. I can't. I have to like fish for it, pull it up with my right needle, orient it correctly on. It's harder, and I'm lazy. I don't want to work that hard. But anyway, I did unravel, and I'm doing that row again.
So did you unravel all the way back to the ribbing?
No.
I guess that's why I thought, oh my gosh, how have you knit so much already?
Oh, that's why you keep saying that.
I thought you fogged like the whole thing.
Oh, no,
you just ripped back. Got it.
No. And I was saying this is, slippery yarn, more slippery than like really a sticky yarn, but I was able to just pull my needle out, unravel, and then I'm knitting on a US 6, and I used a US 3 or something to pick up all the live stitches that were just laying there. Very easy, super easy to do. Put them back on, found my beginning of round, and I'm now right exactly where I stopped unraveling and doing that row that I messed up on.
Yeah, I think one of the things about doing that, and I can't remember which sweater it was that I did that on several times, is be sure to mark your beginning of round before you go ripping. Right? Put one of those light bulb stitch markers, put it actually in the bars between the end of round and the beginning of round, so that you know where that is, because you can just start ripping and then lose your beginning of round. I mean, you can always estimate because of your yarn tails, but...
Yeah, I mean, I didn't do that on this, but I could see where I added my first yellow, and then I could see on the color, the color work.
On the chart.
Exactly where I should be. So
right, that there's a row of pink stitches.
Of pinks, yeah.
But if if you're doing something like this,
yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, save yourself some grief and be sure to mark that.
But this wasn't really in our notes. So if you're doing stranded color work and you're knitting a yoke with make one increases, when you get to a make one increase, there's multiple bars. Some are float bars. Some are bars from stitch to stitch. There's multiple bars that you can choose from to make one. But in this row specifically, I should have chosen the white bar to make a white stitch.
Right.
So it then is more invisible.
So if the chart tells you to make a pink stitch, pick up the pink bar.
Yes.
Yes.
Exactly. Anyway,
Yep.
That wasn't in our notes.
And so this sweater I'm wearing is a Koivua by Caitlin Hunter. And all of the increases are in the cream color between the feathers. So I didn't have that issue.
Right. It was make a cream stitch.
Which was amazing. So I'm very grateful that, yes, make a cream stitch. You can see how these little parts of the sweater are increasing their little triangles. So anyway, and you're wearing your Orkney by Marie Wallin.
I'm wearing my Orkney. It was my dream knit. One of the viewers, I finally went back and answered a whole bunch of comments. Or maybe it was on Instagram. I don't know. Answering all these comments. But somebody said something about knitting their dream sweater. That they told me what 2 of their dream sweaters would be, but they would probably never knit them. And I said, dream big, knit big, do it. This was my dream sweater for 2 years.
Yeah.
Right? I've talked about this before. I bought the yarn and the pattern 2 years before, thought about it, planned it out in my head, planned it out on paper until I was ready to do it. And I am so happy I did. This is, I mean,
you wear it all the time. It's gorgeous. You always get so many compliments.
I love it.
The yarn is fantastic. It's the Rowan felted tweed. And yeah, it's just beautiful.
I love it so much.
Yeah.
So dream big and knit big.
Yeah.
Right?
And I mean, even though you have more colors in your sweater, it's more of it's blended, whereas this is very graphic to me. I feel like this is more of a canvas with all kinds of different
And
colors.
also, this hides mistakes. You would never, ever notice.
Oh, and I have a mistake in my sweater. What episode was that? 2 or 3 or something. We asked people to find the mistake in my sweater. So I leave it there because it doesn't bother me. But yes, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
Yep. If you're a beginner colorwork knitter, I suggest putting stitch markers between the motifs, between the repeats. Actually, not between the motifs. Between the repeats of your chart, so that you will recognize a mistake sooner before you get to the end of the round. Now, it just happened to be that my mistake, I ended up on the right color at the end of the round, and so I didn't realize it until the sweater was completely finished. And yes, I could duplicate stitch it, but honestly,
even if you had stitch markers, you still wouldn't have noticed this mistake because it was just failing to do 2 green stitches. You didn't get off on your count.
No, I didn't get off on my count.
You weren't off center.
No.
Yeah.
So.
And this one, like this, I could have made mistakes and I'd never realized. I mean, some I did, so I fixed them. But even if there are mistakes in it, no one would ever notice because the yarns blend so well and there's just so much going on. This, on the other hand, is so graphic like that. It's going to be much more obvious if I make a mistake.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've only done one of the points.
Okay. No, so we did stagger floats, we did pull-up
Wait,
plank.
can I just tell you?
Yeah.
When I was leaving my house today, I said to my husband, I'll see you in a little bit.
Yeah.
And famous last words, it's going to be a short shoot.
Yeah, we always say that. It's going to go really fast.
Anyway.
All right.
Oh, no, we did 2 points. Pull plenty of slack from the yarn cake.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we talked about keeping your accent color to the left and your main color to
Oh,
the right.
see, we did that too. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, and this next tip, my very first, I'm like leaning on the table, like
That's
getting
okay.
comfortable. My very first colorwork project was a Pokemon ball for my grandson.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, and so I can't say it was the ideal first colorwork project because it was little, I mean, yes, it was in the round.
DPNs, right?
Yeah.
Fiddly.
Yeah, it was fiddly, so that was silly. But anyway, I wanted to make a Pokemon ball. So, and this tip I got from Karen at Pick Up Every Stitch, and she told me to spread out my stitches as I worked them. So I'm going to pretend that this is color work. This is my
I'm doing it right now, actually.
4 points baby blanket. Well, there you go. You do it. So after I work a bunch, maybe 5 or 6 stitches, I want to spread those stitches out on my right needle so that there is at least a yarn's width between each stitch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I definitely do that. For instance, here is the exact point where I have 5 stitches and I have a 5-stitch float behind.
And you really want to make
really
sure.
stretch them out. But I actually will put my thumb on the last color of that float,
that's a good idea.
and I hold it back there so that even if I'm tugging, that it's not going to go anywhere. I hold it further back on my needle, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Holding that.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So there you go. I didn't even know I was going to talk about that.
Yeah, I like that.
It helps me. Here, I'm trying to find this.
The right color.
White bar. But yeah, so I'll hold that last white stitch a little further back on my needle so that when I knit that next white stitch with that 5-stitch bar behind, sorry, I have to retension.
You have plenty.
I have plenty. But then even after I do it, I'll stretch them out again. I just open them up on the needle.
And another tip that goes along with this is work your stitches away from the tips of your needles. So don't scrunch up your stitches on the left and the right so that they're right at the tips of your needles. I mean, you might want to be doing that if you're knitting with one color and you want to knit super fast. Yeah, you want to load your stitches so that you can have one right after the other, but not for color work. You definitely want to work off the tips of your needles, like far.
Yeah, pretty far back.
Yeah. 3/4 of an inch.
That's
at least half an inch, but
when I saw your note about that, I had never really thought of that before, but that's exactly, oops, knitting the wrong color. But that's exactly right. Keeping them a little further away and not bunching them up.
Yeah. Right. On your left or your right needle. So
you're so smart.
Yeah. Not really. Okay, so
this next one is something I don't do or have never done. So.
Okay.
And you've actually talked about it recently for other reasons, but go ahead.
Yeah, so, and I think that this is probably a good example. I'm going to set this down. This is just one stitch here at the bottom, and you can tell how long those legs are on that stitch. These legs are really long. So now, if I'm knitting and the row below, so the stitch I'm knitting into, if I feel like the legs of that stitch are really long, I will knit that stitch, and then on the next stitch I'll pick up that color, the bar of that color between the stitches, and knit it together as if I'm catching a float with the next stitch. And so that shortens up the float between those two stitches.
And that is pretty common when you have a few stitches and then one contrast, and a few stitches and one contrast, because that one stitch is only attached to floats in the back, so it can grow.
Yeah, and it doesn't have your normal tension.
Right.
Yeah,
and you're trying to keep your floats loose, so it has much less tension than a typical stitch.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about color work is that how can it be all at the same time tight and loose? And that's really annoying. So, it's puckered, but I've got these long, loose stitches, So it's like, how do you deal with that tension-wise? So I think really you have to get your tension down and then figure out ways to fix those, the long stitches. As long as you're not puckered. Is this making any sense?
It is. One thing I learned also
puckering is like a fatal mistake. Like, you're really not going to be able to.
You can't fix that.
A little bit of puckering with some blocking is going to be, it's going to help. But if you've got some major puckering going on,
mine is, I haven't done anything and it lays really flat. I think I learned, as long as I know it's not puckering as I'm knitting it, really. As far as uneven stitches or long stitches, I don't worry about them until later, because once I take it off my needles, Arnie and Carlos do this, if you pull it and stretch it in both directions, everything kind of like evens out, and then when you block it, then it really evens out. So I wouldn't worry about those long stitches at this point, and what I do is I don't do what you just said. If there's a really long stitch here and there, I will go in and just manually adjust them. I'll pull on the float in the back, and then ease it into the next section. And these that you're talking about, I feel like it's just part of the design. It
could be.
Every single one is the same, and it's just beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know why my color work is really even in this sweater. Who knows? It's a little pilly too. This definitely needs a wash, but... no puckering at all.
Beautiful.
But I do, if I come across a long stitch in my vest, I will pick up the float behind it and smush that up. Yeah,
Yeah,
not the right
I kind
word,
of
but
leave it
anyway.
for later.
I have read also that, or maybe seen this in another podcast or tutorial, that instead of catching floats, you can do that. You can pick up the float. If you have a long float and you didn't catch it on the first round, first meaning the round below the round you're working, you can just pick up that float in the next round and that'll be your float.
How do you do that? I don't understand how
And
you do that.
I wouldn't do that because I'd be worried that there wouldn't be enough slack in that float.
Okay, so let's say let's say I wanted to pick up a float. I didn't pick up a float in the 5 stitches, but let's say I wanted to. I'm learning right now as we speak. How would I pick up that bar? What does that look like? How do you do it? What do you do? Do you like go under what do you?
I guess I pick it up like a make one. I pick it up like a make one and I just knit it together with the stitch on the needle.
Would it still apply then for staggering your catches?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
I don't know.
This
is over my pay grade. I don't know.
Exactly. Anyway, we are really
experience
rambling. I mean,
level.
hopefully you have a cup of coffee, you're knitting on a fun project, and you have all the time in the world to listen to us ramble.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully we're making sense. And we'll in the show notes I'll put the recap of the bullet points.
And it was funny when Jonna said, "Let's do a mini-sode about stranded colorwork," and I started to think about it, and she sent me her notes, and I said, honestly, I'm going to have way more questions than answers. So
yeah, and put down your favorite colorwork tips in the comments below so that we can learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we really appreciate that.
Definitely.
All right. So this next point, we both knit continental style, but as you can see, Kim tensions both colors in her left hand, and in fact she'll tension 3 colors in her left hand. And there's rings that you can buy that separate the strands if you want to use one. I have one. It's just fiddly. Some people love them though, and I have seen some beautiful ones on Instagram. But I completely drop the color I'm not using, and yes, it takes me longer. But I feel like, especially with sticky yarn, I feel like they stick to each other and then one strand is loose and one strand is tight, and I just drop it completely. So that is in contrast to what Kim does.
And you were saying also earlier, and I don't think I might have cut you off and interrupted you and you didn't finish your sentence, but I think one reason it's easy for me to tension 2 and 3 colors on the way I hold is because I learned the German way with your finger up in the air. So I have a lot of space.
And your left finger, my left finger acts as a bobbin, and your left finger doesn't move. No, and her left finger doesn't move. And
it just hangs out there. So, if you, and actually I learned this recently, I knit open-handed continental, and Jonna knits closed-handed continental.
I didn't know that.
So her pointer finger touches her needle.
Yes.
So there is not much room for her to be grabbing different yarns tensioned on the same finger.
Right. And what I do is if I do that, which I you know what? The only time I ever tension both colors on the same finger is if I'm doing 1 by 1 color work. So 1 stitch blue, 1 stitch red, 1 stitch blue, 1 stitch red. Then I will, because it's just too slow to be dropping.
Dropping every time.
So I do, though, pick up both strands with my pinky finger, but then I tension one above my middle finger and one below my middle finger, so that there is a little bit of separation on my finger.
Yes, and I started really just when I did this. Some people both are just laying over their index finger, their pointer finger,
and then
but mine
finger
always slide together. So my main color, I wrap it one more time around my finger, and that keeps them separate. Now, when I'm knitting 3 colors at a time, my second color is down here. The color I use really the least is on the very bottom. It's definitely fiddly, and I don't love it. But I have tried doing the least used color English style, flicking or throwing.
Mm-hmm.
And even though this way I do it is fiddly and slow, that way is like impossible to me. It's just not fun. And it doesn't look as neat on the back the way I do it. It definitely gets a little wonky. It's not beautiful strands floating across at the same level.
Right. I mean, if you can flick and, if you can throw and pick, that's ideal.
Yeah. But anyway.
And, that would take practice, and I'm not saying that I couldn't do it, but I think it would take practice, and I'm just not willing to put in the practice right now. So for me to get the best tension, I just completely drop the color I'm not using.
But that's more of a new thing for you, right?
It is.
Was it really this project that you started doing that? It really was. You didn't really do that before.
I would hold 2 strands on my left finger.
So we're always learning.
Yeah.
Right?
And I just, it's patience, honestly.
By the way, remember I said a couple of videos ago that I wish there was like a degree in knitting.
Evidently there is.
A few people sent me the
Master Knitter.
What is it called? The Knitters Guild. I can't remember what it's called. I did register for not the Master Knitter program, but I joined whatever it is. I read all of the qualifications just to be accepted into the Master Knitters program, and I was like, I could never qualify.
Oh, really?
Like, things like, and I don't even know how they know. Do you send samples of your knitting? Like, if you're doing cables, are all of your stitches even size, or is the one on the far left next to the left purl bigger? Yes. Things like that. I don't know if I would qualify. It's kind of I would love to do it, but I don't have that skill level. Even today, realizing that I was doing my make ones incorrectly and then had to rip back. A master knitter wouldn't have done that. Anyway, thank you for that information. I'm seriously considering it, but I have to really look at the qualifications and see if I'm even close. So, what's next?
Let's see.
Go up a needle size for Colorwork.
So sometimes the pattern will suggest you do that. And I do think that that's a more experienced knitter might just do that intuitively, or might do that as a habit or as a rule. I did not go up. So here, the vest I'm knitting is all over Colorwork.
Right.
So there is no areas of plain stockinette. So, for instance, I mean, this is pretty much all over Colorwork, but if I was knitting a Colorwork yoke, and this has happened to me before because what is the name of that sweater? That's a Gold Wing by Jennifer Steingast. It's a Colorwork yoke. And I should have gone up a needle size for the Colorwork, because Colorwork just, by its nature, tends to be a tighter gauge than just plain stockinette. So it was really pulling across my shoulders, and I frogged the whole thing.
But I wonder, though, I think now you're better at it.
I am.
I didn't. This does have a big section of stockinette, but I did not go up a needle size.
Okay.
But I'm really being careful about, I know I'm a tight knitter, so I am extra stretching out my stitches on my left needle after I make them. And I think I'll be fine. I keep checking it. I think I'll be fine. So, but it is definitely a general guideline to go up a needle size for your Colorwork and then go back down to the regular needle size.
Right. And some patterns will suggest it and some patterns don't, but do what you want.
Yeah. So this I don't have to worry about it again because it's all over
Colorwork.
Yeah.
So retention didn't change.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
And I was knitting on my vest, and I think I was thinking about the very first Colorwork socks that we did together.
I almost brought those today.
Oh, really? Minor disaster. I mean, they fit, and it wasn't a tension issue. I think I just goofed on the Colorwork chart. And yeah. Anyway, they're still socks, and they still keep my feet warm, and I do still wear them around the house. But when you're knitting a colorwork sock, and this really applies to small circumference things, but, you know, I could turn my vest inside out, but if you turn your work inside out so that normally you are knitting, you're going to have to help me get this right here. I can't do it with this because it's not colorwork.
Here, I'll do it with this.
You sure? Okay.
So now I'm going this way, so I can't do it, right? You have to start from the beginning, don't you? Going inside out?
Uh-uh. So I can just start, I can turn this inside out. And then just
Oh, so you're knitting along the back. I see.
I am. I'm knitting along the back instead of, I'm knitting on the side that's away from me
your body.
Instead of the side that's close to my body. And just by virtue of the fact that the outer circumference is going to be greater than your inner circumference kind of guarantees you longer floats.
So your floats are going around the outside of the garment.
Which is the longer or the greater
because when they're on the inside, they're going to go like as the crow flies.
Right.
From stitch to stitch, and so they might be away from your garment on the inside because they can cut the corner.
Yeah, they can cut the corner.
But when they're on the outside, they have to shape around the garment. Oh, that makes so much sense.
So especially for socks, knit them inside out if you're knitting colorwork. Just, it helps those floats stay loose.
And I think for socks too, I probably would go up a needle size because you really want them to be stretchy.
For sure.
This yoke, I mean, I did a gauge swatch. It's going to lay gently across my upper body. But a sock that I need to like get on my leg.
Right, over your heel.
Yeah, I definitely want stretch. So I would probably go up a needle size for a small circumference.
And I think colorwork socks actually suggest that you use, they don't suggest US ones. You know, they suggest bigger needles.
And actually, I almost wore my Meadow Moon today. So the only colorwork things I've ever done is this. My Meadow Moon is the blue with a very, very subtle colorwork. Meadow Moon by Jennifer Steingast, right? And the colorwork socks we did. And then we did some, you mentioned them recently, the little blocks that Arne and Carlos did. They did this whole thing at the beginning of
the pandemic.
This knit along thing with these little squares that they released every day. I can't believe I got behind after a few days. I stopped. But I do know, and it must be the small circumference, that on my Meadow Moon, no puckering up here, but on my sleeves, nobody else ever notices it. But I know that it's tighter. My floats are tighter on my sleeve, and I must have been that small circumference.
Did you magic loop them?
Probably.
And there are issues with magic looping with colorwork. Sorry, more dust. And with DPNs, you know, where you have that break between the needles, making sure that your floats are long enough across that needle join.
What I tend to do is I'll move, like typically you have even amount of stitches on either side. I'll adjust where the break lands so that I'm ending, so I never have a float spanning across too many stitches on either side of the break where you're flipping around for your magic loop. I try to have the stitch that's going to start floating be right before the break so that it's basically going from where it's going to go.
Another way to avoid that is to catch your float on the last stitch of that
needle.
Yes,
I've done that too.
Before you go to the next needle. So I think that's why I don't have any colorwork socks. Because, I don't know, it just sounds complicated. I know that Summer Lee has a colorwork sock tutorial on YouTube, Summer Lee Design Co. And she designs beautiful colorwork socks, so she does have a tutorial if you're interested.
That's why I buy colorwork socks. I just buy them. I think they're beautiful, but I don't want to knit them.
They are. Oh my goodness. I was watching a video today about someone doing increases in the gusset of a sock, like in the gusset of my mittens, but colored, you know, every other stitch was a different color, and it was just beautiful.
Wow.
So, let's see. So we already talked about when making increases, lift the bar that is the same color as the stitch you are creating. And someone asked me what I thought would be a good first colorwork sweater. And I think the general advice is choose something with a really small motif so that possibly you don't have to catch floats at all. I've only caught floats in my academic vest in 2 rows, which has been great. So one of the sweaters that comes to mind immediately is the Badger in Bloom by Ann Bensel, because I think it's just every other stitch color work. So no floats whatsoever. I've heard people just rave about it. It goes super fast. I think the yarn is fluffy, so it fills in any kind of
That's
gaps.
another thing. My Meadow Moon, because I held mohair with the whole thing, that covers up a lot of mistakes.
Right.
Or a marled or a mottled kind of yarn is also going to... It's not high contrast like that.
Right.
Yeah. Or like
where
this.
a mistake is definitely going to be glaring.
Yeah.
So, and definitely wash and block your color work, because, the yarn needs to bloom and fill in all those, weird gappy places, and everything's, like you said, all the tension's going to even out when you do that. So.
And also, I mentioned it this way, and I must have heard it also. Yarn has memory. And so when you buy it, its memory is being in a hank or a ball or a skein. That's what its memory is. So then when you knit it into a stitch, it wants to go back to how it was. It doesn't want to be curled in these little S shapes, these squiggles. So when you block it, you're giving it a new memory. And then it's just happier. It's not fighting. It's not fighting against your motif or your pattern. It's then like resolved. Okay, this is how we're going to live for the rest of our yarn life.
Right.
And that's why someone else mentioned that they love to go to thrift stores and find inexpensive cashmere sweaters and unravel them and reuse the yarn. What a great idea.
Yeah.
Or any yarn, actually, for that matter. Or even a yarn that you've knit and you're not happy with it. But when you unravel it, of course, we know what unraveled yarn looks like, especially.
And, you can knit it kinky, but best practice is to wash it.
Yeah, wash it. Put it in, well, first wind it into a cake, and then wind it into a big round hank, and tie it
so
off.
You don't have a bunch of spaghetti.
Yeah. And then soak it, just like you would soak a sweater that you're blocking, and then, squish it, and you can
roll it up into a towel.
Get the water out, and then hang it, and let it dry, and then recake it. And now you have unwrinkled, you've given the yarn a new memory. It's forgotten its old sweater shape, and it's ready to make new memories. Memories.
You can even lay it down on blocky mats, too. I did not. Was that from the movie? With Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford?
Yes.
I hated that movie.
A Star is Born? Or was it no. The Way We Were.
The Way We Were. So that was kind of before my time, honestly. That was something that my parents probably watched, but I just remember having bad feelings about that movie. So
yeah.
Anyway, so you have some questions.
I do.
On the bottom here?
Oh, we've already answered a lot of them.
Okay.
Okay, so how do you guys do 3 or more colors per row? Do you love it? Do you hate it? I've already counted. In the body, there's 3 sets of 3 rows. So 9 rows total.
Not too many.
Of 3 color. And then in the sleeve, the cuff color work, then there's also 3 rows. It's not a lot, but I dread it. And actually, I said that earlier that I ripped this back to the mistake I had made. And I had just gotten into the 2nd row of the first 3 color rows. And, it's easy to regret or feel bad. But honestly, first of all, I'm fixing the mistake that I wouldn't be happy with. And second of all, it gave me a little practice on those 3 color rows. Because I think all the 3 color rows are somewhat similar. So I've practiced. And there were things I didn't like about how I was doing it at first. And so now I can redo it in a better way. So let me know if there's tricks to 3 color rows.
So the color that you're using the least in the 3 color rows
is way back here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep. Furthest to the left. Yeah.
And then, I watched a 3D knitting tutorial on weaving in your ends as you go, which is a really nice thing to do, especially in a Fair Isle garment like this where you're switching colors often, to weave in your ends as you go.
That's what I wanted to say. That's what I was thinking of. So in this sweater. I tried that because I love doing that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to worry about it when it's, did you say that, when it's flat?
Mm-hmm.
Because you start a new color at the end of the row, it's in the seam, no big deal. But when you're knitting in the round, I did that actually in this I steeked it, so I changed colors in the middle of the steek. But I think in my Meadow Moon,
Here's an example. I haven't cut any of my yarn ends, but a lot of these are woven in.
So before you get to the color in the new, where you need the new color, it's kind of like catching floats. You go under it and then you go over it, and then you go under it and you go over your new color until you need it. So it's just floating along the back, under and over the stitches before, and then you're ready to use it, and then it's woven in. You don't have to do anything else. Just cut it and you're done. But I noticed with this, this yarn doesn't fill in the gaps as much. I tried to do that when I added the white, and you could really see it through the yellow. You could just see it. And so I'm just leaving them hang, but I weave them in after I get a few rows beyond, and I weave them in. Is that it?
Yeah, I think so.
Did we make sense at all?
I don't know. That's kind of my fear the whole time, but like I said, I will put some bullet points in the show notes below so that in case we didn't make any sense at all, you can just go down and get the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah, and obviously we really do. With comments, we definitely read every single comment, so comment below. And if it's not really a question and it's just kind of a short like, oh, great video, we'll just heart it. If there's a specific question, we really always answer specific questions. It might be a month later. Sorry, it just depends. But really, if you really have an involved question, please just email us.
Yeah. Our email is in the show notes.
Yeah. It's much easier to answer in email.
Yeah,
Definitely.
And we'd love to share some of your tips and tricks for colorwork too.
Yeah.
You know, things that we haven't thought of, and so.
Yeah, we probably haven't thought of a lot of things.
Oh yeah, a lot of things.
I was thinking of more things as I was driving over here, but anyway, probably forgot those too. So I think that's it.
Okay.
Yay! So like, subscribe, share, comment.
Turn on your notifications.
Oh, right. We never say that.
I know. I always say it because Arna says it. Turn on your notifications.
Yeah, hit that little bell, because then a bell doesn't ring, but it like gives you a little light.
And so my favorite podcasts, you know, I don't want to miss an episode, so I, you know, turn on my notifications so I know when it says Sarah has a new podcast.
Exactly.
Amy Palco or whatever. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And definitely check out our merch, and you know, get a knitter's planner. I think they just had a big sale because the year already started.
Okay.
So maybe it'll be even a bigger sale. I don't know. But I love mine. I think the first one I bought, I didn't even buy in January, you know, December the year before. I bought it partway through the year, but it's a calendar. It's like a date book. So I love it. I love my knitter's planner.
And you actually, she'll transfer the colorwork charts into her knitter's planner, at least.
I didn't on this one.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't on this one.
Typically you do, huh?
I always
With colored
do.
pencils?
I always do, but I didn't on this one. Just lazy, trying to do it the old-fashioned way, just using the chart.
And I use my Good Notes, so I just pull up the chart, and I have an Apple Pencil, so I can, you know, make marks on the chart and remind myself of the colors or whatever it is I need to do. So, and I like that I can, you know, use 2 fingers and expand the chart, so I can make it really big, or I can align it with the top and the bottom of my iPad, so I don't forget which row I'm on, or I can actually draw a rectangle and move that up and down the chart. So,
That's a great idea.
yeah.
So that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
And see you next time.
Oh, you said it.
I did?
Bye.
Did you see, and I messaged you, did you see a couple of viewers said, I loved your catch episode. Ready?
Ready as always. Oh, catch episode.
Can you believe I actually just took my Christmas stockings down yesterday?
Oh, really?
Catch episodes.
Yeah, and mini-sodes and let's talk-episodes.